način da govornici govore engleski. Ja sam se onda ipak odlučio par riječi govoriti na engleskom jeziku. Međutim, ja bih vam isto htio dati do znanja da meni nije u interesu da ovdje sad paradiram sa svojom engleskom sintaksom ili morfologijom. O tome možemo kasnije, koliko god mi je to i struka. Ali u svakom slučaju još jedanput se hoću zahvaliti gospodinu Zedu Ziljariću, gospodinu Peri iz Australije, Bruni Bušiću, dobrih mojih prijatelja, također i mladi pravaši koji ne samo što politiziraju, nego također i čitaju i Đalskoga i ozbiljne knjige i tako dalje. Pa evo, ja ću se uzeti za slobodno, obećajem, neću vas puno zamarati, 15-20 minuta govorit ću o identity. What does it mean, identity? In fact, I've been writing about this issue of identity, and if you wish, you can look at my website, www.tomsunic.com. So have a look at some of my academic and less academic pieces. I will speak slowly, so you will be able to understand me. After that, if you have only a critical question, I'll be more than happy to answer it. Thanks, Daniel. Okay. You hear in your studies this word identity over and over again. This is like a trendy topic even at Harvard now, at Frankfurt University. Any place you go to, everybody talks about identity. Now, let's first just talk a little bit about the linguistics of, or rather semantics of identity. My parents, my grandparents, they never asked themselves who they were. They knew very well that they were Catholics and Croats. When do we start asking about identity? We start asking about ourselves and who we are, and about our identity at the moment when we are about to lose it. And this is the problem we have to face it. Especially in our quote-unquote fancy multicultural societies. Why do problems have with their identity in multicultural United States of America, or for that matter in Germany or in France? Well, nobody wants to say that in open because it's not very politically correct. Young Germans I know, young Americans, my young students in America, they don't know who they are. They are being lost. 30% of American citizens are of non-European origin. Keep that in mind. And the number is growing and growing. Those big shots in Zagreb, all those missionaries who come, all those big guys, they will not let you know that America is becoming more and more balkanized, more and more racially fractured on the implicit level still. One of these days when things hit a certain fin, things may get nasty. Now you have the same replica of it in Germany, to a lesser extent. 10% of the German citizens are of non-European origin, 15% of French citizens are of non-French, whatever that means, origin. Now, I'm sure somebody will ask you in a starry-eyed manner, well, Croats, young Croats, why don't you integrate? It's the magic word, integrate. Why don't you start talking to Serbs and to all of those other, peoples here in the region? Wait a second, folks. We tested Yugoslavia twice in the former century. And how it ended up? In a carnage. My conclusion? I hate to say that this is not a value judgment, but this is a fact. Multicultural countries never work. The end result is chaos, carnage, and more hatred. Now, if you ever want to push Croatia into some third Yugoslavia, rest assured it's going to be a very nasty affair. Hence the reason, again, I'm not going to bias you here, but hence the reason I'm very skeptical of the European Union. It's a normative issue, but it's not the realistic issue. Now we see the birth pains of the European Union. 10 years after, what do we have now? They have problems with it. Fiscal policy, monetary policy, and everything needs to be sort of a mishmashed and doctored up, in an improvising fashion. Anyway, real quickly, I'm going to enumerate a couple of those identities and what those identities mean. As I said a while ago, this word, semantically speaking, about 100 years ago, the word identity was used in police files and in forensic medicine. It was certainly not a word, it was certainly not a concept in defining someone's ethnic identity. Like 100 years ago, if you read some sociological treatises at Filozofski fakultet, ask your professors, I don't know what they think about that, you will not find the word in some older, like Durkheim if you read, or some early sociologists of the early 20th century, you will not find the word identity in depicting someone's ethnic identity. It was primarily a legal term. It is only nowadays that this has become a very abstract term, which lends itself to different interpretations and unfortunately different definitions. And here's the problem we have, because I need to define the concept before I want to communicate with you. We have to at least agree on common concepts here before we make some conclusions, right? So if somebody asks me, Tom, what is your identity? Well, I don't know myself. Why don't you ask me a very specific question? Tom, what is your ethnic identity? What is your birth? What is your gender? Where do you come from? This is more specific. So let's try to be specific. Let's not just parade with those big words like democracy, tolerance. You know, we heard that back in communist Yugoslavia, this pep talk, you know, this Mickey Mouse talk, you know, and look how it ended. It ended in a carnage in Tito and so on. I'll come to that in a second. I'll just slow down a little bit. Now, the first modality of identities we can call a fake identity. Look through the window and you will see many young Croats who actually sport and who display their fake identity. For some reasons they're a little bit ashamed, they're a little bit, you know, they have hang-ups about declaring themselves I'm proud of being Croat or being Croats. So they say, look Tom, I'm a cat worshipper, I'm a dog worshipper, I have some, you know, my sexual style is very different, you know, I just want to be a good homosexual, so just, you know, this is what my identity is all about. You have to respect it, there's no question. We don't want to discriminate those people. But this tells you again that in a modern, liberal age, in a modern anomic society, in a modern rootless society, in a modern decadent society that we are observing here on the Plac Bana Jelačića, you see more and more young people. I can see, I mean, I can tell them because I live with them. I can see when they take mash, when they take meth, you know, when they smoke, what type of a dope even they took before they sit down here. So you feel sorry for those people because they're lost forever. And they now yearn for some identity. And this is what I call fake identities, when instead of sticking to your family and sticking to your Catholic beliefs, sticking to your Croatian roots and being proud of it, instead of that you flock to some Mickey Mouse substitute ersatz identities, the Germans call it Ersatzidentität, such as, you know, dog worshipping or some different type of, you know, tribes, you know, tribalism has become a sort of a new phenomenon in the sociology. There are quite a few books, you know, that are dealing with the topic. I'd be happy, if you're interested in it, I'd be happy to give you some references, folks. So this is the fake identity, which is the replacement of our original ethnic Croatian identity. I need to tell you that there is a considerable difference between, and this is a little bit too academic, and I hope you can follow me on that, between identity building process in the United States of America as opposed to the identity building process in Europe. In Europe, for instance, what we have is the identity building process within the people, within the folk, within the narod. You know, the problem is, on a purely linguistic level, please be careful of that. In America, the word people is very ambiguous. This is the English word, people. The people cannot be translated by the German word das Volk. Volk has an entirely different meaning. Narod. Narod, you cannot translate it by people in the English language. Hence the reason that in America, even those political big shots, you know, like Clinton or Mitt Romney or whatever they are, they like using the word nation and state synonymously. In America, in the political process, and also in the studies of humanities, if you study in America, you use the word nation and state synonymously. Not in Central Europe, though. In Central Europe, particularly in Germany and in the Slavic countries, this is not the case. For me, narod means one thing, and the state means another thing. You guys, can you follow me on that? Državotvornost has an entirely different meaning than narodni duh. These are two opposite things. There were strong Croats living in this artificial entity of Yugoslavia who had a very strong ethnic or national feeling, but they did not have the state. And the opposite way around, the other way around. You can have people who live in the states who actually pay big monies, you know, who are running this state, but they have a very weak national sense. They have a very weak narodny sense. This is something you've got to keep in mind, because this is something very typical for Central European peoples, for Central European narodi, for Central European Völker. This is not the case in Anglo-Saxon, particularly in the UK, or for that matter in the United States of America. So to you, I mean, most of you are students, be always careful when you talk to your professors. Ask them always to clarify those concepts clearly, to clarify those words and in a historical context, because otherwise you will be lost, you will get a passing grade, but you will probably forget most of it next day. All right, so this was something I needed to tell you about. And also another important thing, which is now quite important in America. Americans, of course, they sport their flags. Every house down there, from California down up to Idaho, they have those flags and posted on their porches and so on. But their concept of their national identity is different than ours. In America, it's very strong, and this is also, we can say, a substitute type of identity, substitute identity. Constitutional patriotism. I'm sure some of you who are legal scholars who study law may know what I mean by constitutional patriotism. This has its historical reasons. Now in America, precisely, I don't want to confuse you, precisely because of the fact that America had a different state building process. First became the state and then the national Americanism, okay? It was quite the opposite way around here in Europe. Hence the reason that in the United States of America, some new type of I don't want to say fake, it may sound too pejorative, but some substitute identity had to be doctored up, such as constitutional patriotism. You believe in law. You are pathologically riveted to your law. This is your identity. For that reason, this is much, much weaker here in Croatia. There are good reasons for that and bad reasons as well. Of course, in Germany, Verfassungspatriotismus, this was the import copy from the United States of America, because of course, you know what happened in Germany in '45, it was occupied by the Allies. You know, it was completely brainwashed. It was, first thing what they did before the Nuremberg was, you know, to clear up the schools. You know? So, but this is a different matter. We'll leave it. It's a tricky topic, so I'm not going to touch on it. Verfassungspatriotism, constitutional patriotism, has nowadays become a prime pillar of the liberal age. Constitutional Verfassungspatriotism. Forget about your roots, forget about your race, forget about your chauvinism, forget about those ugly Croats, those bad Croats. Let's stick to the law. And you know, even old Seneca, some of you who are in the legal studies, folks, the more laws you have, the less people respect them. Unfortunately, I need to tell you that. And every decent person here who is a lawyer will tell you the same thing. Why do people need more laws? In America, every little thing, smoking cigarettes, you know, smoking dope or whatever, every little thing needs to be legalized. Every little thing needs to be put into law. All right, so much about this. And now I'm coming to my two other modalities of ethnic identity. I hope I'm not bothering you too much. Now, we have also, let's call it the identities, reactive and random identities. And here I have to make a rather strong criticism of nationalism. Ask yourself a question. How does nationalism function? How does national identity function? Unfortunately, in due honesty, I have to admit that nationalism often functions on the basis of the exclusion of the other. Let me put it differently. I can assert strongly my Croatian ethnic identity by reasserting or deasserting or denying someone else's identity. Or let me put it more blatantly and more vulgarly if I can. Many, many Croats I know, many Croats that I admire, good nationalists, good people, they constantly harp against the Serbs. So they are good Croats in as much as they are good anti-Serbs. Or for that matter, you can say many Polish nationalists that I know of. You know, they are strong Polish nationalists, you know. But once you touch the issue of Germany, especially some territorial issues that they still have in Germany, like Danzig, like Pomerania, and so on and so forth. So I will tell you, and this is my first value judgment, I resent and I hate this type of a nationalism which is based on the exclusion of the other. Try to be Croat, be proud of yourselves without hating your neighbor. As I said a while ago, and this is my central point, whoever tells you, either a foreign diplomat here one of these days, or some big guys here promenading here, when he starts telling you multiculturalism is good, this is fine, you know what you've got to tell him? Tell him to shut up and to shove it up where the shine never shines. Okay? Because he's lying to you. He knows very well in his damn environment. I lived in Bronx, I lived in what is this place? In Ludwigshafen. I know exactly how you got to be armed with heavy weapons if you want to go through Compton. Compton is southern LA. I would love to take every Croatian diplomat before he starts his mandate. Go with me to Compton. But please, make sure you got M16 with you first, 2 cell phones, and don't let your wife go out. You can pontificate, you can tell those friends you love the entire world. But this guy, I don't want to say what his race might be, he was not going to ask me that. But you don't hear that in the newspapers. You might once in a while hear that in the newspapers. Usually they will not tell you what the race and what the identities of this other guy is. Unless it's a guy who's a honky, who's a white guy who does some crazy things. But we'll talk about this some other day. And this is not just in the States, this is not just in Germany, this is in Australia just recently. People congregate implicitly to their gene pool. I hate to say that, but listen, people know very well you have the 12th arrondissement in Paris where you have only the Vietnamese. You have, for instance, in LA, well, about 60–70% of people are of Mexican descent in LA because all whites are basically moving now to Dakota and Montana. But you don't hear about this in the newspapers. So in fact, they're lying to your professors, lying. Well, sit down, read, and get yourself the right picture of what's going on. All right, this is the false identity I was talking about. Now I got to tell you something about default identities. This is the last point before I finish. Default identity is a very strange phenomenon which usually occurs when? In the state of emergence. We have some empirical examples. Here are some empirical examples. Look, in 1991, what happened here? The stuff. It was a war, you know. I came here in '93. For me, the biggest shock in my life was when I saw the former communists, all of them, with no exception, becoming all of a sudden, you know, good Catholics, you know, sitting in the first pew of the cathedral, you know, praying God, you know, Maria, Jesus Christ, and so on and so forth. For me, this was a shock. Not a shock. I never trusted their doses of creation. I never think that they were good Croats in the first place. But for me, it was a shock because I thought, did they ever really believe in Titoism? Did they really believe in their communist ideology, which they made their career with? I mean, listen, folks, I don't need to name their names. Just go up to Pantovčak and go up to the mark, and you will see, without any exception, these are young folks who actually grew up in this communist environment. They were contaminated with those feelings, not just with the ideological, but also spiritually, what have you. So basically, this is a very peculiar phenomenon which occurs, and I repeat it, in the state of emergence. In the state of emergency, let me illustrate it again. You're a nice guy, you're a liberal fellow, you're a leftist guy. You walk down the Bronx, or you walk down Compton late at night, and you want to help those blacks. You want to truly help them. But don't do that, because those folks will read your mind differently from what you think they will read. They will perceive you differently from their own self-perception. You can follow me with that. You can go if you wish to Kosovo, or whatever place here in Zagreb, and you can tell those folks, look, I love you folks. I hate Croatian nationalism. I hate nationalism of any sort. I want to help you out. The guy will tell you, get out of here, honky, I'll cut your head off, or whatever. You know? So be always careful. Try to read the mindset of those other people, because what's crossing my mind is not exactly what's crossing your mind. Try to empathize, both positively and negatively, and you have got to build up your intelligence level a little bit. This is what you got to do. This is how you're going to be good in your business. And again, I would urge you all, not because of my English or whatever, learn the English language, learn all those tricks, learn the languages, study, and first and foremost, and I will finish with that, be what you are, be proud of Croats. You got nothing, you know, to lose. I mean, you can be a very modern person, and yet at the same time you can be a very conservative person. Why should we always be servile and crawl on all fours, and every guy who comes from the West tells me do this and do that? I told him once again, I didn't want to be vulgar. Just tell him to shut up, you know, every person who comes here. We got enough intelligence, going back to Kralj Tomislav, I was named by him, Kralj Zvonimir. We had people, you know, scattered from Argentina, my friends in Argentina, my friends in Australia, my friends in Chile. They're prominent people. We have intelligent folks all around. Stick together and fight for your good. Well, folks, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Zed, for your attention, and I'm at your service.